Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Secretary of Shade. Now, first, I want to start off by saying hello to everyone. Thank you for joining in. But I want to say something. I have been doing this YouTube channel, these live readings, for about 2 years now. 2 years officially. It'll be 2 years officially in August. I've been doing this YouTube channel. Right? And I have read many a book. I've read Omarosa's book. I've read Bob Woodard's book. We took a look at April Ryan's book at one time. I've looked at the Bolton book. I've looked at Stormy Daniels' book. I've read Rick James' book. I have read a lot of books. I have never, in my time reviewing and reading these books, ever gotten a cease and desist in my video blog on YouTube. It's never happened. Ever. In life. And I get it. Like, be clear. This is why I never read the entire book. I only read a few chapters and that's it. Because I understand, intellectual properties and things like that. But it is noted on record that I have helped sell books for people. That's just a fact. So, for those of you who don't know, my videos, my readings of the Murray Trump book, have been blocked. I was also contacted by CBS Audio about the book. Now, here's my personal opinion, right? I think what it is that, maybe they didn't like, that I was reading the book or the manner in which I was reading it. But the reality is, honey, your audiobook is boring. I never listened to the audiobook, but I listened to a sample just to see what the home cooking was up to. And it was trash. It was trash. And it's not quite how I do it, and I understand that even how I do it isn't everyone's forte. Which is fine. That's great. But I think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting that of all the books that I have read, the Trump book by the Trump family member is the one that gets, like, the yank, right? Bob Woodard's book sold a ton of copies. Omarosa's book sold a ton of copies. Like, I find it interesting that the book that gets the Gaga is the is the relative book, right? So, long story short, I get it. I'm not upset. I have gained quite a following on YouTube. Secretary of Shade, we're at almost 20,000 subscribers. Thanks, guys. Hand clap for yourselves. So I've gotten a lot out of reading books, more than I could say for a lot of people. So I'm not upset or anything like that. But I got another book, and this book was actually written by I wouldn't call them like friends, but they're definitely associates of mine. Because friends is like people you hang out with every day that, we're friendly. I know them. But I think that they're great journalists. I think that what they wrote about, it's about my hometown, about my city. And I think it's important. So in Baltimore, we had a case where a Baltimore police officer, a detective, Sean Suter, was murdered. We know he was murdered. They claimed he killed himself or what have you. There was some long concocted story, right? And it was found out, it came out that he was going to testify against some officers that was in this task force, or like they were allegedly, basically they were dirty cops, right? So bam, the day before he's about to testify, he kills himself. Everybody in the city know that that's not the case. His wife knew it wasn't the case, but that's the story that they ran with, because the police department basically covered it up. Well, Baynard Woods and Brandon Soderbergh wrote a book about this gun force, the police department unit. It's called I Got a Monster: The Rise and Fall of America's Most Corrupt Police Squad. It has the Baltimore City badge on there. And at first I was like, I don't know, am I going to read this book? Because I lived this story. But in looking through the book, I was like, bitch, honestly, this is a TV show waiting to happen. I'm ready for them to get contacted about Hollywood for the rights. Okay? You know, and so I'm interested. Somebody said I should try to fight the claim. I'm not fighting that claim against Mary Trump. She doesn't matter that much to me. I already gave her enough free press. But I'm going to read this book. I actually contacted them to let them know. I contacted them and the publisher to let them know that I would be reading. Got the A-OK. I'll only be reading one chapter of this book, though, so you will have to buy it. But I think it's an interesting story, right? So, to put this into context, this police unit, they basically rob, like, drug dealers, rob citizens, set them up, because they know that, you know, they're not going to call the police. There's not going to be any issues. But they're essentially dirty cops. And here's the thing. Cops that do, or people that do things to one group of people are more than likely going to do it to another group as well. So, I'm going to start. I Got a Monster by Brandon Soderbergh and Baynard Woods. This is chapter 1. Sergeant Wayne Jenkins was going the wrong way. He steered a silver Malibu full of plainclothes cops against traffic on a residential street. They the Jump Out Boys. Rolling past brick row houses with white trim and pitched roofs resting atop dappled hills spotted with resurgent spring grass. He was looking for a monster. Jenkins, the only white man in the car, was the driver, and he was the boss, the officer in charge of this brutal four-man squad. Detective Marcus Taylor, the runner, sat in the front seat beside Jenkins, ready to jump out and give chase, okay? In the back seat, Maurice Ward, the unit's steady hand, and Evodio Hendricks, the squad member most often burdened with completing the paperwork that will legitimize the Baroque kind of bust about to play out on Jonquil Avenue, a one-way street in northwest Baltimore. That's around my way. So basically, all right, so peep the scene. This group of dirty cops, they got a squad. Everybody's assigned a job. So you got homeboy, he the boss. Okay. Wayne Jenkins, he the boss. The Jump Out boy, Taylor, he the one that's going to run and get you. They got somebody to do the paperwork, and they got another person to keep watch to make sure everything get done correctly when they set your ass up. Welcome to Baltimore City, bitch. This is going to be a cake. Okay. These men in tactical vests, cargo pants, and running shoes, part of the Baltimore Police Department's Special Enforcement Section, knew as much as anyone about the city's underground economy of guns and drugs and desperation that drove people to them. Sarge, as they called Jenkins when they weren't just calling him Wayne, was always further indoctrinating them into his philosophy of hot rod policing. Wrinkling his forehead with two big creases folded horizontally above a nose slightly too narrow for his wide, doughy face as he squinted and gesticulated, giving orders. Never just saying, but emphasizing, yelling, whispering, condemning, cajoling. The words of Wayne Jenkins were actions. Over his 13 years on the force, He had studied the habits and customs of the drug trade and developed an arcane set of rules about how the game is played. Acura TLs, Honda Accords, and Honda Odysseys were dope boy cars, he explained, and stopping them often paid off. Driving the wrong way on a one-way added the element of surprise. Pulling up fast on a corner and popping open the passenger door and chasing whoever ran did too. He called it a door pop. It was a numbers game. The more people they stopped, the more likely they were to get drugs or a gun. So anybody that lives in inner city, hood, black neighborhood, anywhere, knows about the Jump Out Boys. It's interesting reading their philosophy and how they do it. This book is I Got a Monster. The rules were all variations on a principle Jenkins had learned well. Don't let probable cause get in the way of a good arrest. Another rule: stop and search anyone over 18 years old with a backpack. So when Demetrius Brown, a 36-year-old black man, jogged out of one of the row houses with a camo backpack and got into a minivan idling against the curb, Jenkins hit the gas. His prowling, weaponized mid-sized sedan, rigged with a siren and flashing lights, sprang forward and then stopped short, inches from the van's front tire, at an angle, just close enough that there was no way the van could pull out. Ori Stevenson, the van's driver, saw the detectives fanning out of the car. Heavy black vest flashing police in white letters, a burly bulldog-like white guy and a thin black guy with a flat top coming up on each side of the van, and right behind them, two more. One super fast, nervous and warming, and the other bearded, overlooking. They did not draw the weapons hanging from their waists. They didn't need to. How much money you have in the box between your feet? Jenkins barked in his Baltimore white boy accent, part Philly wine and part Southern drawl, with smashed elongated vowels tempered by the black slang he picked up on the streets. What money? Brown asked, moving a backpack that held a Quaker Oats box packed with $20,000 out of view with his feet. Stevenson, a 36-year-old black man with the bulk of an over-the-hill linebacker or an ex-con, said little. Stoic in a minivan on a suburban street at 3:30 in the afternoon on a cloudy spring day on March 22nd, 2016. You don't have a warrant, Brown said, tightening his ankles around the backpack on the floor of the van. You can't search me. There was no legal reason for this stop, but the two black men were not shocked to see the cops come jamming up the wrong way and block them in. The city was at war, had been ever since they could remember. People said police had been lying low since Freddie Gray. You couldn't tell it from these guys. Hendricks said something about how Stevenson's windshield was tinted. That always looked good on paper, even if the tints weren't dark enough to violate the law. In this city, you can only have but so much tint. You can't have the windows tinted too dark it's like an actual law. Ward slid the van's door open and saw another backpack, zipped shut in the middle seat. He unzipped it, found a half a kilo of coke, and said something to his squad about the Steelers. He hated Pittsburgh's rival of Baltimore beloved football team, the Ravens. Steelers was code that they used to announce drugs or guns. Don't move, put your hands up, Jenkins said. They pulled Stevenson and Brown from the car. Taylor handcuffed them. Jenkins patted them down, took their keys and their cell phones. Stevenson had more than one phone on him and read them their Miranda rights. At any time, being questioned by myself or another officer, you have the right to answer questions or refuse to answer questions, Jenkins said. He usually rushed through the words, impatient and nearly poking the culprit in the chest with his restless, stubby fingers, annoyed to have to go over all of this again by note. Taylor filmed the ritual with his cell phone. Smart cops created and controlled video. Always be aware of how you tell the story, on paper and later in court. And always make sure you're the one with the footage. And don't fuck up and forget about a security camera up on a pole or let bystanders take their own video that might contradict you. Bitch. The rules of the game, bitch. This is the rules of engagement. Okay? A woman came out of the house they'd seen Brown exit. She had her phone out. Taylor saw it too and rushed right past her and into the house. She turned to follow Taylor and Jenkins snatched her phone so she couldn't record or call for help. Inside the house, Jenkins started asking her questions. She was the mother of Brown's children. Taylor went upstairs and looked around for drugs, for cash, for guns. So they running up in these people's houses and got warrant the first. Lady come out the house. Okay? Just this is chapter 1. Lady come out the house with a phone. He run up in there. She chase him, create a diversion. The other one gag her, take her phone. And they just start searching. No warrants, no nothing. This is Baltimore City Police, bitch. Nothing. So they didn't find nothing in the house. They walked back outside. Jenkins had to work fast. A serious gambler, he often got lucky. But he wasn't lucky enough to pull up on a cocaine deal in a residential neighborhood by accident. This was more than investigative intuition. Jenkins had studied up on Stevenson, researched his history, and the federal drug case that had snagged him a decade earlier. He had shown Ward the news stories about Stevenson and all his high-powered, politically plugged-in associates who had been charged. Now, many of them were back at it, and he was watching them. This is a big one, Jenkins told Hendricks. He followed a procedure. Tell Stevenson he can go free if he'd flip and give them another name, his plug or rival dealer. Jenkins would work his way up the ladder that way. All that stop snitching talk was bullshit, and that applied only to testifying. On the street, most people were more than ready to talk if it meant they could walk and nothing ever went on paper, especially younger guys who would give up their own mama if it helped them out. Jenkins put Stevenson back in the van, in the middle seat where the coke had been, and got in beside him. Reared under the equally strict regimes of stop fucking snitching and zero tolerance, Stevenson and Jenkins had more in common as enemies than they had with anyone out there in the straight world. In the early 2000s, after getting out of prison for manslaughter, Stevenson was running a dope shop for a crew that feds dubbed the Rice Organization in the Park Heights neighborhood in northwest Baltimore. That's where I'm from! Okay? Howard and Ratio Rice and their crew funneled $27 million in heroin in the city. Stevenson helped, and when they got snagged in a federal investigation, he got caught on a wiretap, which was enough for a RICO Act conspiracy charges. Stevenson pleaded out to a state charge to avoid federal time on a RICO claim, but he stood tall and didn't tell on nobody. He was home in 2011 and got a truck driving job, lost the job, and eventually ended up here sitting handcuffed in a van about to be questioned by a really jump-out boy with big dreams. When the Rice Organization case began in 2003, Jenkins was just a skinny, shy rookie on the force. While Stevenson was away, Jenkins transformed himself into a super cop, a star of statistical policing, scooping up guns, making arrests, getting numbers. He broke the rules sometimes and wrecked a lot of cars along the way, but that was the culture. In 2009, Jenkins made an arrest that led to the headline, Baltimore police make largest ever drug seizure. He and his partner turned in 41 kilos of coke and $11,000. Jenkins said the dealer didn't want the detectives to disturb his mom, so he led them straight to the massive bricks of blow stacked in the unlocked bed of his truck. It was that easy. No one questioned the story. Top brass loved all that coke laid out for the news cameras, and Jenkins got a Bronze Star for the bus. Other cops marveled at his prowess and joked that Jenkins could nab the lowliest street dealer with a single gel cap of heroin one day and have the kingpin supplying the raw the next day. Now these two old soldiers, each more than a decade deep into the endless drug war, sat in a minivan together on a leafy street. Stevenson saying nothing at all and Jenkins running through his tricks. He would try to level with the target first. Talk real low about keeping it 100 with him, floating freedom in front of him in the form of a question. If you could put your own crew together and rob the biggest drug dealer you know, who would that drug dealer be? It wasn't exactly snitching if you were answering a hypothetical question about robbery. He told Stevenson that he was a federal agent, one of his most common lies. The coke deal had come across a wiretap, he claimed. They knew who Stevenson was working with and who he was talking to, and now they had his phones. And since Stevenson wasn't the target and they were after someone bigger, he should give up his connect. Jenkins asked Stevenson where he lived. He gave them the address on his driver's license on Pressman Street. They knew that wasn't true. They said they had been watching his house. He lived on Heathfield Road in East Baltimore. Where do you live, sir? Jenkins asked. 4100 Heathfield, sir. Stevenson said, giving Jenkins the wrong street number. Both men were strangely formal like that, calling each other sir. Now, just to give you context, when they were saying sir, like, the drug dealer, like, Stevenson's probably saying 4100 Heathfield, sir. Yes, sir. Like, it's real, it's a way that they say it it's very antagonizing. It's very, like, condescending, you know? Both men were strangely formal like that. It was an act that had to play out even when everyone was lying to each other. Jenkins mentioned Stevenson's actual address on Heathfield, where he lived with his wife, Kiana Holloway, and their kids. He told Stevenson that they had a team there right now executing a search warrant. They had taken his keys and would use them to prove he lived there. They might end up arresting his wife. Stevenson didn't give anybody up, but Jenkins said he copped to a stash, coke, cash, and guns. That was enough. The interrogation ended. Jenkins hopped out the van, exited his thick frame electrified. He called the wagon to come and take Stevenson and Brown to central booking. They had 2 addresses for Stevenson. Jenkins announced to the squad. It made sense to check the Pressman Street first. It was a plausible dope pad. Jenkins said he would call a sergeant from the Northeast District and tell him to go sit on the other house, the one on Heathfield Road, and make sure none of Stevenson's boys got anything out of there before they arrived. Jenkins didn't call the sergeant, though. He called Donnie Stepp, a bail bondsman, cocaine dealer, and longtime Jenkins family friend. I need you to come to this address as quick as you can, Jenkins told Stepp, giving him the Heathfield address. I got a monster. Stepp, cue ball bald with a giant gold cross hanging from a thick chain around his neck, knew what Jenkins meant by a monster. It was one of Jenkins' favorite words, an honorific applied to dealers really worth robbing. They'd had this kind of arrangement for years. Jenkins would tip Stepp off to a stash or deliver stolen drugs to him, and they would split the profits. They would sometimes watch a guy for months. Stepp bought all sorts of specialized equipment through Double D Bail Bonds, his bail bonds company. Stevenson had not been one of their shared targets, so Stepp wasn't sure what Jenkins knew, but generally, he wouldn't leave the house unless it was a big job. Some $20,000 pissant robbery didn't do it for Stepp, but if Jenkins had a monster, he was in. Jenkins gassed Stepp up some more over the phone, told him Stevenson was a drug lord. There's $250,000 on top of a safe in the bag. There's $500,000 inside the safe, and there's 10 kilos in a closet 6 feet from it, Jenkins said. I got the whole squad here, so they don't know. Jenkins assured Stepp that no one was at the house and directed him to pull his truck up in the alley and break and enter through the back door and clean the place out. You can throw the safe on a dolly, throw it in the back of the truck, and drive out, Jenkins said. So this is the fucking Baltimore City Police. Now, I'm not defending the hustlers, the drug dealers, or whatever. But you a Baltimore City police officer. You got the bail bond people in on the scheme with you. This is Baltimore City. So when you see people on TV, when you see, you know, Baltimore going off and all that, know that it's for a reason. People in Baltimore don't trust the police most times for a reason. And I'm reading you the reason, okay? Because once again, it's not about defending drug dealers, but if you do this to a drug dealer, what are you doing to an average citizen? People are creatures of habit. They don't just say, oh, I'm going to only attack drug dealers. You know? According to the GPS, it was a 20-minute drive from Middle River in the county where Stepp lived. Stepp sped off, headed into the city, thinking of a score that would bring him, if he did his math right, about $1.75 million. He never made that much from a single heist before, but he believed it was possible. Calls like this were why Stepp always answered the phone when Jenkins called. Jenkins and his crew cut southeast towards Stevenson's house on Pressman. He would try to hold his squad there and buy Stepp time to get to the other house first. Stepp pulled up to Stevenson's house and saw a young man, a kid really, running out the back with a bag. They made eye contact. Someone was already in the house cleaning it out. He called Jenkins and told him about the kid. Jenkins told him to make sure he was looking at the right house. Go back out front and look at the address and count how many houses it is from the corner, and then count again in the alley just get inside. Jenkins could only stall his crew at Stevenson's other home for so long. The rickety 2-floor row house on the west side was pretty much empty except for boxes and boxes of adult diapers inside. The house was about to be turned into an assisted living facility. Jenkins couldn't keep them there much longer, so Stepp had to hurry. So he's buying time for the Bales bombing to go rob the motherfucking house. Meanwhile, they go to the other house that the drug dealer that told them about. Bitch, it's empty. They about to be in assisted living. This is a gagger. This is a script, bitch. This is a television show. Okay? Stepp hung up. As a Bales bondsman, risk assessment was his job, and this wasn't worth the risk. But the stash of a supposed drug lord still tempted Stepp so he decided to stick around. He parked half a block away and watched Stevenson's house through binoculars. A few minutes later, Jenkins, Hendricks, Taylor, and Ward arrived. Jenkins wanted to get into the house for an exploratory pre-war excursion he called a sneak and peek. The trick was to do it without leaving a trace. Witnesses, cameras, or alarms could show he entered without a warrant. So when he saw a neighbor looking out the window of the house next door, Jenkins created a complicated ruse that would allay the suspicions of any nosy neighbor. Jenkins told the squad he would go knock on the neighbor's door and start talking to her, and then Taylor would yell about a suspect running from the back of Stevenson's house. Jenkins would dash off to act like he was helping Taylor give chase. Then Jenkins would come back to the neighbor and ask about the phantom perp out back. It was a riff on a technique called chasing ghosts, making up a foot chase to justify a stop or a search. Out back, Taylor yelled, right on cue, as Jenkins talked to the neighbor. He darted off. Then Jenkins returned to the neighbor's door with Taylor, breathing heavy as if they'd been chasing a fleeing burglar. The neighbor, a retired teacher, cracked open the door cautiously. Taylor took out his phone and began recording the charade. Jenkins asked her if she had seen anybody running. I didn't see anybody, she said. I only saw you guys walking up my walkway. Okay, Jenkins said, interrupting. Which is why I came down, she said. Her left hand on the handle of the screen door, keeping it shut. So this is a retired teacher who's skeptical, who's keeping the door shut. Even retired teachers don't trust the fucking police in this city. Okay? Didn't you see us take off running, Jenkins asked. I did. Jenkins kept talking, transforming a fake foot chase into a real one, nudging her to confirm on camera that they had run off after someone, peppering his leading questions with ma'am. Did they have any young kids? Because this boy was about 16, 17 with a book bag, Jenkins said. Oh no, she said, they have 2 little ones. Jenkins leaned his weight on the row home's formed stone facade and said it all one more time to her for the camera. He was on the back porch and he had the screen door open when we passed there, Jenkins said. He casually grabbed the side of her storm door and edged it open. She snatched it back and gently shut it. My detective said, out back, that's why we ran, Jenkins said. Obviously, I was having a conversation with you and left you, but I just wanted to know that's why. I wasn't trying to be ignorant and just leave you, but my detective had somebody running. Then Taylor started talking. That's why we asked, Taylor said at the foot of the steps, still recording, because he, the individual, when we was trying to talk to him, was like, uh-oh. Taylor's voice faded into a mumble. Man, thank you so much for your time. So basically, he's trying to convince this older lady, this retired teacher, who don't trust his ass anyway, that she saw what she saw when she didn't. Steve watched through binoculars as the detectives walked over to Stevenson's house. He took a picture as Jenkins opened the front door. He was often taking photos and videos of Jenkins for insurance, he said. Jenkins walked inside Stevenson's home, a nice place with hardwood floors, leather sofas, and African art on the walls. He hurried down the carpeted stairs into the half-finished basement and into a sort of semi-finished rec room with an overstuffed white leather reclining couch and a flat-screen TV. The other side of the basement was unfinished. Near the steps, there was a cooler full of kilos and cash. 2 black Glocks in there, too. Jenkins dug down into the cooler and proudly pulled out a kilo of cocaine, wrapped and packaged as the squad came down the stairs. When was the last time y'all seen one of these, he said. In a small closet under the stairs, Jenkins found a safe, haphazardly hidden under a mountain of shoeboxes. He told his guys he was going to run out to the car and get a ram and a pry bar so they could open up the safe. He walked up the stairs and outside, with 2 kilos stuffed down into his police vest. He came out the door looking like Santa Claus, Stepp said. He was protruding from the vest, so I knew. I was thinking it was the 10 kilos that he was talking about and the $250,000 that was on top of the safe. Jenkins stashed the kilos in the trunk of his Malibu. Then he called Stepp and asked where he was. Look up the street. Jenkins told Stepp to drive to a cross street nearby. As Stepp eased his truck up the street, Jenkins came flying up behind him. They both pulled over. Jenkins opened the passenger door and threw 2 kilos into the truck. Where's the other 8, Stepp said. Jenkins told Stepp that Taylor had seen the 8 kilos, so he had to bring it to evidence control. Then he told Stepp he was about to go on vacation. Can you get me $5,000 within this week, he said. Yes, Stepp said, I ain't got a problem. Jenkins told Stepp to drive the speed limit, and if he got pulled over, call so Jenkins could come and fix it. Though he was nearly 50 and bald with almost invisible eyebrows, Stepp still looked like a kid, especially around his mouth when he got excited, and as he drove away, he was as giddy about the score as a child on Christmas, even if he was a little disappointed in the end that the fat man hadn't bought as much as he promised. On the slow drive home, Stepp got to thinking, if there was $250,000 on top of the safe, he had not gotten a cut. He was the one risking his life here. Either Jenkins double-crossed him, or Stevenson's people had already taken everything, or both. Stepp was accustomed to Jenkins' exaggerations and deceits. It amazed Stepp how many schemes Jenkins could hold in his mind at one time. He could never be straight with anyone, and that was dangerous. He knew someone was in the house, Stepp recalled. Had I kicked that door, I probably would have been killed. Still, Stepp wasn't going to complain too much when he was driving away with 2 kilos of coke. A kilo went for $30,000 wholesale, and Jenkins would give it to him for $15,000. Since he sold grams for $100 to $125, he could net nearly $200,000 off of today's quick trip into Baltimore. So they're reselling the drugs, bitch. They reselling the drugs. With Stepp gone, it was time for Jenkins to get a search warrant for the house they had already entered and looted. Jenkins took Hendricks and Taylor with him to get the warrant and made Ward wait there alone to watch Stevenson's house. Ward was stranded there without a vehicle. All he had was his service weapon. If Stevenson was really as big time as Jenkins said, any crew he sent to raid the place and take the safe would be much better armed than Ward, and he would be dead. Depending on how much money was in the safe in the basement, that was a very real possibility. There were 3 entrances to Stevenson's house, and no way he could watch all of them. This was a sneak and peek purgatory. Ward sat down. He got up. He checked the front door with its cut glass window in a flower shape shifting the light. He checked the back door. The door in the basement. That one was the worst. Anyone could park in the alley and roll through. Back in 2015, when Jenkins asked him to come over to the department, Ward happily accepted. It was an honor when Jenkins wanted to work with you. The position promised an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. schedule, no nights or weekends, plenty of overtime, and ample opportunities to steal. Ward had stolen plenty. He and Taylor had lifted a little cash before together when they worked with Jenkins, and he had taken money with Mamadou Gondo, who was now a detective in the gun trace task force. When cops stole money together, it brought about a new level of trust. When he was in the patrol, Ward had believed such trust was the only way to make it into a plainclothes squad. So basically, all the plainclothes officers be stealing, bitch. All of them be stealing. And you wonder why don't nobody trust the police. All of them be stealing. When Ward joined Jenkins' unit, he became fast friends with Hendrick, who also skimmed a little money here and there. Hendricks was a working man with a family. He had 5 kids to support, and his wife was a full-time student, so he'd fill in the gaps, buy little things here and there, with the proceeds filched from a dope boy's pocket. That was where Ward was when he joined Jenkins' new unit. A serious cop who took care of his family and was not above making few extra bucks. He quickly realized Jenkins played for much higher stakes than that. Almost immediately after Ward joined, Jenkins pulled over a car with 2 trash bags of cash in it. It had seemed like a random stop at first, but then Jenkins told Ward he'd already tracked the car back to its owner's house in the county. At first, he talked about going into the house and finding an excuse for a warrant and then calling in the county cops. Then he changed his tack. You guys willing to go kick in this dude's door and take the money? Ward, Hendricks, and Taylor all hesitated. No one knew what to say. Jenkins let it drop, but not long after that, they rolled up on a weed deal at Belvedere Towers, an apartment complex stuck between Roland Park and Mount Washington, where Jenkins, Taylor, and Ward took $15,000 and about 30 pounds of pot from 2 men. Jenkins told the dealers he was a federal agent following on a wiretap, and he was confiscating the drugs but were not making arrests. When they left, Jenkins started weaving in and out of traffic, taking Ward and Taylor out to a park where they left their police vests and their phones and radios in the car and got out and walked into the woods and split the money like in a movie. Ward asked Jenkins what he was going to do with the weed in the trunk of his car, and Jenkins said he was going to take it home and burn it. Then he changed the subject and demanded that they all go out and party. Jenkins liked to celebrate success, whether it was a bust or a robbery. Another of the weird rules one learned quickly with Jenkins was drinking a twisted tea, the alcoholic iced tea together at the end of the night. He called it tea time, and he expected everyone to join in. After stealing the weed and the cash from Belvedere Towers, Jenkins insisted that they stop by a strip joint in the county. Ward sat at the club sipping a drink while Jenkins threw money around, got a lap dance from a dancer, and then took her out to the car where it seemed to Ward like his new boss straight up robbed a stripper. That night, Ward never retrieved his cut of the money from the trunk, and Jenkins never mentioned it. Ward's wife was a vice cop, and he wouldn't be able to explain where that kind of money came from. And he had a son in his teens, the age when kids start snooping around the house, getting into everything. He often thought about asking to get out of Jenkins' unit. If theft was supposed to breed trust, it wasn't working the way with Jenkins. Balancing a life as a cop and a robber was stressful. Belvedere Towers kept Ward paranoid. He imagined the guys they robbed were undercover or that it was all caught on camera somehow. Ward would have to accept whatever money they took from Stevenson when Jenkins returned with the warrant. There was no way he could just leave it in the trunk. He would be blackballed. Maybe he already was. Maybe they stopped trusting him at the Belvedere Towers where he'd forgotten his part of the cash. Maybe this was all a setup to ambush him. The 3 entrances to Stevenson's house promised some kind of retribution for everything he'd ever done wrong. Time was interminable terror. Then the thing he feared happened. A car, a couple of voices, someone pounding the door. It wasn't gangsters with guns ablaze, but the sister of Stevenson's wife and girlfriend. Ward wouldn't let them in, and the girlfriend was raising hell, acting all aggressive, of course. He called Jenkins, who told him he was working on a warrant with Hendricks. Taylor was submitting the evidence and would be back as soon as he could. Ward called to get a cop in uniform to help him watch the house. Hours earlier, Jenkins said he called a sergeant to watch the location in the first place. You never could trust what Jenkins said. A patrol officer arrived and helped Ward drive the two women away. And then Ward stood there with a uniform waiting for his squad to return to rob the place. When Taylor finally arrived, they sent the uniform away. Then Stevenson's wife, Kiana Holloway, and Stevenson's mother walked in the door. The women asked the cops what they were doing there. Reese sent us here, Taylor said. He showed Holloway a paper that said they had found drugs and money in Stevenson's van. That would be enough for a warrant on his house. The cops kept both women in the living room like prisoners. The room was dim, lit by lamps that cast long, ominous shadows. Holloway sat in a chair against the wall, her phone casting dead blue glow across her face. Ward and Taylor stood back across from the couch and took turns looking around the house. Taylor couldn't help trying to be Jenkins, trying to spin out the story further, starting a conversation with Holloway and with Stevenson's mother and recording it. I don't know why your son ran, Taylor said. If the women agreed with him and acknowledged on camera that the kid had run, it would be more evidence to show the police had been justified in entering the house. I said, come here, man, and he just took off. Both women said at once. That's a Baltimore chick for you. I don't know why he was scared. We had our vests, said police. He probably scared, Stevenson's mother said. There's been a couple times police was at my house growing up. I never ran, Taylor said. Stevenson's mother left to go help with the kids, and Holloway sat there with the two cops. Sometime after midnight, Jenkins and Hendricks finally came back with the warrant. They had worked hard on the affidavit. The trip to Stevenson's Pressman home was omitted from the narrative entirely, and the whole confusing saga of the fleeing kid was condensed into a plausible and brief explanation for entering the house. It claimed Stevenson had told them everything, that he had hung his head and begun breathing heavily, and had asked about how he could get out of it. That Stevenson had told them to open his phone and find his sources. That was when Jenkins started to get out the van. Stevenson had said, wait, you want to arrest my child's mother. Then the affidavit said Stevenson told him he had 7, maybe 8 kilos and guns and a safe full of money in the house. Jenkins waved the paper in Holloway's face as he entered. Then he went back out the front door. And Taylor recorded video of him using the key to show that it fit and enabling them to make a connection between the drugs in the car and the drugs in the house. Jenkins read Holloway her Miranda rights, and Taylor recorded that too. Ma'am, do you understand your rights? Jenkins said. Holloway said. Yes or no, ma'am? Yes. Okay, what do you do for a living? She told him she was a nursing assistant. It seemed like every dope boy girlfriend is a nursing assistant, bitch. I feel like that's the official dope dealer girlfriend job, bitch. Do you know in this house if there's any firearms, narcotics, or money? No, I don't. She clutched her phone and Jenkins leaned forward, asking her about drugs and money again. No, she answered. Okay, ma'am. What are your... Jenkins said and stumbled over his words, trying to talk too fast. We're about to search your residence. Taylor turned off his camera. They told Holloway she had to leave. So, now once again, I am not advocating, and if for those of you asking, this is I've Got a Monster by Brandon Soderbergh and Baynard Woods. I'm not advocating for drug deals, drug use, drug dealers. The reason why I find this book so interesting, and the reason why I decided to read this book, is because it shows how deceitful the police department can be. And it shows you, for if you are a white person watching this broadcast and you are confused or conflicted about why black people feel they the way that they do about police, or why black folks protesting, and why is it this and why is it that. This is why. I just read you a chapter about a whole scheme to rob somebody's house. To rob somebody. Now, let's take the fact that he was a drug dealer out of it. Even if, he has drugs, he has money, there's still protocol. And when you violate the rights of people, like, trust and believe, this force didn't just violate the rights of a drug dealer. They probably violated the rights of a lot of people who were innocent citizens. Somebody said my white boyfriend just waved his hand to wave the DDM. Hi, Kelly Quinn's boyfriend. And that's the thing. Like, for me, like I said, people are creatures of habit. And when people are talking about, and I want to bring this piece in about defunding the police, they're not saying get rid of the police department, dummy. Okay? What they're saying is, case in point, there was one piece I read in this book where it said it was a guaranteed 8 to 4 shift with plenty of overtime. What do they need overtime for? They basically just spent their whole shift setting somebody up. Meanwhile, if there was a violent crime happening, their asses ain't know about it. Because they were too busy setting someone up. Okay? And I'm going to tell you something. When you look at things like this, it further helps you understand why people are frustrated. When you take your oath and things like that, you're taking an oath to uphold a certain standard and values. How can I look at a drug dealer sideways when the police is low-key worse than the drug dealers? No shade. Now, I'm from Baltimore City, where this book takes place, where these events happen. I ain't never seen drug dealers do a lot of shit. I ain't never seen a drug dealer. And the sad part is, these cops are using the law. And they're videotaping. So that goes to show you, them body cams is bullshit. Because they edited the footage. The only defense you really have is your own camera. So now when you reading this book, now you should be able to understand why people always filming everything. It was a time where I was like, damn, you couldn't pay me to be a cop because people film. I can't even do my job. No, people need to film, y'all. I don't care if you helping old ladies cross the street, bitch. It needs to be on film. Because at the end of the day, this is ridiculous and it's sickening. You're spending your whole day, and then the thing about it shows how everything is a business. From jails for profit, now we get ready to get deep. Jails for profit. He's including the bail bondsmen. He's including the bail bondmen in the whole scam. Okay? The bail bondman. This is the person you going to, hey, I'm locked up. I need to get out of jail. Help me. Little do you know, the bail bondsman to help rob your ass and put you in fucking jail. That's the whole shade. And it's not about getting drugs out of these communities, because guess what he was doing the whole time? He's stealing the drugs, getting the damn bail bondmen to go resell the shit. So it ain't like he was robbing. Let's not make this some Robin Hood story where he was robbing the drug dealers and burning the drugs or whatever or getting rid of it. No, he gave that shit right back to the bail bombing. The bail bombing. How the fuck you a bail bombing selling coke? Prisons for profit. Bail's bombing, working with the police officers to set your ass up. Because guess what? You got to get a bond. So they keep each other in business. You can't be a bail's bombing if nobody got bails. So it's all one system working together. This is all a business. And in most cases, people of color are the casualties to this business. I say that to say this. We have to keep our foots on the pedal. Okay? We have to make sure that we go out and vote. We have to watch our police departments. We have to watch our elected officials that appoint these people, these commissioners and shit. Okay? We have to watch that because, yeah, he's selling drugs, but guess what? The drugs still made it into the community, sis. It ain't like he didn't sell the drugs and the cops kept it. And now it makes sense. In this city, you see police officers with beautiful homes. Big truck, Ford F-150. I swear, everybody in the police department got either an SUV, an Escalade, or some big shit, or a Ford F-150. Now I know how the fuck they can afford it. It's police officers making more money than the mayor and city council members. If we want to be honest. That's just a fact. You know, so we have to be mindful of that. And I definitely encourage you to go out and support, get this book. This is by two journalists who are associates of mine. I think they did an excellent job. They worked really hard on it, looked into the facts. I was debating about reading this book because I didn't want to be partial. But I thought that when I looked through it, I thought that they did such a good job on it that I was like, I have to cover it. Now, on Thursday, we're going to have a classic good old cabinet meeting where we'll talk about all of the current events and bullshit that's going on in our world today. Until then, make sure you follow me on social media at Dapper Dan Midas. If you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to subscribe. I will see you guys on Thursday. Oh, we have the author. We have the Baynard Woods. Okay, the author is in the author is in the comments. Hello, Baynard. Thank you so much for letting me read your material. I think the people love it. Hopefully they go out and buy the book and get some sales. Brandon Soderbergh. Oh, we have both of the authors in the chat. Make sure you send them some love and go buy the book. It is available at your local book retailers. You can also buy it on that godforsaken devil's website, Amazon. But make sure you support good, researched, factual journalism. And once again, I thank you guys. I will see you on Thursday. You be safe. Have a good evening. Chappelle.